My son's wife looked at him and said, "Your mother comes here too often. She's destroying our family. Tell her to leave." And my son said nothing. He didn't defend me. He just sat there in silence. So I stood up, picked up my bag, and walked out without saying a word.
I'm glad you're here with me today. Please like this video, stay with me until the very end of my story, and tell me what city you're listening from. I'd love to know how far these words have traveled. I used to believe that love was enough. That if you gave everything you had to the people you loved most, it would come back to you somehow. I believed that for 62 years. I don't believe it anymore. Not because love failed me, but because I finally understood the difference between loving someone and disappearing for them. My name is Eleanor Hartwell. I am 62 years old. I have worked as an emergency room nurse at Carolinas Medical Center in Charlotte, North Carolina for 31 years. I have seen people at their worst, their most desperate, their most broken. I have held the hands of strangers as they took their last breath. I have stayed calm in rooms full of chaos because someone had to. I thought that composure, that steadiness I'd built over decades, would protect me from the kind of pain that hollows you out from the inside. I was wrong. The Sunday everything changed started like any other. I had driven across town to Ballantyne, the quiet, tree-lined neighborhood where my son Nathan and his wife Brooke had been living for the past 18 months. I had a gift in my hands, a wooden box I'd spent 3 weeks putting together, filled with photographs of Nathan from the day he was born until the day he got married. I'd had each one restored, printed on archival paper, mounted behind glass. It was his 32nd birthday in 4 days, and I wanted him to have something that mattered. The front door was slightly open when I arrived. I could hear voices inside, low at first, then sharper. I should have knocked. I should have stepped back, walked to my car, driven home. Instead, I stood in the doorway and listened to my daughter-in-law tell my son that I was poisoning their lives. And I listened to my son agree with her. I set the wooden box down on their front porch, right next to a potted fern Brooke had never watered properly. I walked to my car. I sat behind the wheel for a long time, my hands in my lap, the Charlotte afternoon going quiet around me. Then I drove home to my apartment in Myers Park and I made a phone call. Not to Nathan, not to Brooke, to James Whitmore, my attorney. And that night, I opened my laptop and canceled the automatic payment I had been making every single month for 18 months, $1,500, gone with a single click. By morning, everything had changed. To understand why that Sunday broke me the way it did, you need to understand what came before it. Nathan's father, Gerald, died of a heart attack on a Tuesday morning in October 15 years ago. Nathan was 17 years old. He was sitting in his second period history class when the school counselor came to pull him out. I was in the middle of a 12-hour shift at the hospital when my phone rang. Gerald was 49 years old. He was healthy, or so we thought. He went for a run that morning the same way he did every morning, and he never came back. I remember standing in the hospital corridor, still in my scrubs, still holding a patient's chart, listening to the voice on the other end of the phone tell me that my husband was gone. I remember the chart slipping out of my hands and hitting the floor. I remember Dr. Sandra Mills, my colleague, catching me by the elbow before my knees gave out completely. I did not have the luxury of falling apart for long. Nathan needed me. That was the only thought that cut through everything else. My son needed me to hold it together, so I did. I went back to work 6 days after Gerald's funeral. I picked up extra shifts wherever I could. Gerald had a small life insurance policy, enough to cover the mortgage on our house for a few years, but not enough to carry us indefinitely. I knew what the numbers looked like. I knew what I had to do. For the next 4 years, until Nathan graduated college, I worked. I worked morning shifts, evening shifts, double shifts on holidays when the overtime pay was better. I remember one winter, Nathan was in his sophomore year of high school, and he came home from school one afternoon and told me that all his friends were getting the new North Face jacket, the one that cost $230. I told him I would look into it. That night, I sat at the kitchen table after he went to bed and I did the math on a piece of notebook paper. $230 was 11 hours of work. It was the electric bill. It was 2 weeks of groceries if I was careful. I bought him the jacket. I skipped lunch every day for the next 3 weeks and told myself the coffee was enough. That was the kind of mother I was. Not because I wanted gratitude, not because I wanted to hold it over his head someday. I did it because he was my son, and because Gerald was gone, and because someone had to make sure Nathan Hartwell grew up knowing he was loved completely. He graduated from the University of North Carolina 4 years later with a degree in civil engineering. I sat in the bleachers alone that afternoon, in the May heat, holding a small bouquet of yellow roses I had wrapped myself. When they called his name and he walked across that stage, I cried so hard the woman sitting next to me put her hand on my shoulder and asked if I was all right. I told her I was more than all right. I was the proudest person in that stadium. 3 years ago, Nathan married Brooke Calloway at a vineyard venue outside of Asheville. She was 26 years old, sharp and pretty and confident in the way of someone who had never really been told no. I gave her the pearl earrings that had belonged to Gerald's mother at the rehearsal dinner, a gesture I had thought about for weeks. Something borrowed, something old, something that said welcome to this family. Brooke thanked me with a smile that did not quite reach her eyes. The comment started small, the way erosion always does. Quiet and invisible until one day you look down and the ground beneath you is simply gone. "Eleanor, you really don't need to bring food every time you visit. We have a grocery store," said with a laugh, so I laughed too. "Nathan and I are trying to establish our own routines on Sundays. Maybe call ahead next time," said so reasonably I could not argue. I adjusted. I called ahead. I visited less. I told myself this was normal, that young couples needed space, that I was being respectful of their boundaries. What I did not understand then was that for Brooke, every concession I made was simply an invitation to ask for one more. 18 months before that Sunday, Nathan called me on a Wednesday evening in early spring. I remember exactly where I was, sitting in my armchair by the window in my Myers Park apartment, a cup of chamomile tea going cold on the side table, the Charlotte skyline just visible through the oak trees outside. It was the kind of quiet evening I had learned to be grateful for after decades of chaos in emergency rooms. Nathan's voice on the phone was the voice I recognized from his childhood, the one he used when he had broken something and was trying to figure out how to tell me. "Mom, I need to talk to you about something, and I need you to hear me out before you say anything." He and Brooke had found a house in Ballantyne. 4 bedrooms, 2.5 bathrooms, a backyard with a deck, in a neighborhood with good schools and tree-lined streets. The kind of house young couples in Charlotte dreamed about. The asking price was $380,000. They had been approved for a mortgage, but only barely. Their combined income as a junior civil engineer and a mid-level marketing associate was enough to qualify, but just enough. The down payment was the problem. They were $55,000 short. "I know it's a lot to ask, Mom." His voice was careful, measured. "I know you've already done so much." I did not hesitate. Not for a single moment. I had been quietly setting money aside for years. Pieces of Gerald's life insurance, savings from double shifts, a small inheritance from my own mother that I had never touched. It was meant to be my retirement. The financial cushion that would let me slow down someday, maybe travel a little, maybe finally take that trip to Ireland that Gerald and I had always talked about. I liquidated it all. $55,000 transferred into Nathan and Brooke's account within the week. But that was not the whole story. Even with the down payment covered, Nathan and Brooke's income was not quite enough to qualify for the monthly mortgage payments without a cosigner. Nathan asked me quietly, carefully, if I would be willing to put my name on the loan and contribute to the monthly payment until they got more financially stable. $1,500 a month. Half the mortgage. "Just until we get on our feet, Mom. Brooke's up for a promotion at the agency. 6 months, maybe a year at the most." I said yes. Of course I said yes. There was one condition Nathan attached to the arrangement, one I accepted without thinking hard enough about it. Brooke could not know about the monthly payments. She was proud, he explained. She would feel humiliated, accepting what she would see as charity from his mother. It would cause tension between them. It was easier this way. I trusted his judgment. He was my son. I believed he knew his wife better than I did. What I did not know was that Kevin, Nathan's older brother, had called me 2 days after the house closed escrow. Kevin was 36, a Finnish carpenter working out of Denver, a man of few words and good instincts. "Congratulations on the house, Mom," he said. Then, after a pause, "Can I say something?" Always. I've never fully trusted Brooke. I don't know how to explain it exactly. She's just always seemed like someone who's very focused on what things look like from the outside. Another pause. Be careful, okay? Just be careful. I told him he was being uncharitable, that Brooke was young and adjusting to married life and that he should give her a chance. Kevin was quiet for a moment. Okay, Mom, I hope I'm wrong. He was not wrong. I had spent 3 weeks putting the gift together. It started with a shoebox I found at the back of my closet, full of photographs I had been collecting since the day Nathan was born. Nathan, at 2 days old, wrapped in a hospital blanket, his face scrunched and red and perfect. Nathan at 5, missing his 2 front teeth, grinning at the camera at a 4th of July cookout in our backyard. Nathan at 12, standing beside Gerald in the driveway, both of them holding fishing rods, squinting into the morning sun. Nathan at 17, in his black graduation gown, the last photograph I had of him and Gerald together before everything changed. I had each photograph digitally restored, printed on archival paper, and mounted behind glass in matching walnut frames. I arranged them in a wooden keepsake box I had found at a craft store in Plaza Midwood, sanded smooth and stained a warm honey color. On the inside lid, I had a small brass plate engraved. For Nathan. Every year of you has been worth everything. It was not an expensive gift by any measure. But it had cost me something more than money. It had cost me weeks of evenings, sitting alone at my kitchen table, sorting through decades of memories, deciding which moments deserved to be preserved. His birthday was 4 days away. I wanted to drop it off early, before the week got busy. I pulled into the driveway of the Ballantyne house just after 2 in the afternoon on that Sunday. Nathan's truck was in the driveway. Brooke's car was parked beside it. The front door was not fully closed. It was open just a few inches, the way doors sometimes drift when the latch does not catch properly. I heard voices before I reached the porch steps. Brooke's voice first, tight and controlled. The way a person sounds when they have been holding something in for a long time and have finally decided to let it out. Your mother is poisoning everything we've built, Nathan. She shows up whenever she feels like it, brings things nobody asked for, acts like she has some kind of claim on our life. This is our home, our marriage, our future, not hers. I stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. The wooden box was heavy in my hands. Brooke, she means well. She's just, I don't care what she means. Her voice rose, sharp and clear. I am telling you how it feels. Every time I turn around, she is here, or she is calling, or she is sending things. It never stops. She is suffocating us, Nathan. She is suffocating me. I waited. I stood completely still at the bottom of those porch steps, and I waited for my son to speak. The silence that followed was the longest of my life. You're right, Nathan finally said. His voice was quiet, almost hollow. I'll handle it. That was all. Not once did he mention what I had given them. Not the $55,000, not the 18 months of payments. Not the decades before any of that, the double shifts and the skipped lunches and the $230 jacket I had bought while eating nothing but coffee for 3 weeks. Just, you're right, I'll handle it. I set the wooden box down on the porch beside a potted fern with dry browning edges. I turned around and walked back to my car. I did not knock. I did not call out. I did not give either of them the chance to see my face. I drove home with both hands on the wheel and my vision blurring at the edges. When I got back to my apartment, I sat in my armchair by the window for a long time. The city moved outside, indifferent and unhurried. Somewhere below, a dog barked. A car alarm went off, and then went quiet. Then I picked up my phone and called James Whitmore. He answered on the second ring. James, I said, I need to talk to you about protecting myself, financially and legally. How soon can we meet? Monday morning, he said, without asking why. Monday morning, I agreed. I opened my laptop that night, found the automatic payment scheduled for the first of the month, $1,500. I stared at it for a long time. Then I canceled it. I did not sleep that night. I tried. I lay in bed with the lights off and the ceiling fan turning slowly overhead, the way I had done every night for 15 years in this apartment. The familiar sounds of Myers Park drifted in through the cracked window, a car passing on the street below. Wind moving through the oak trees, the distant sound of a train somewhere across the city. None of it helped. At 2:45 in the morning, I gave up, pretending. I got up, put on the kettle, and sat down at my kitchen table with my laptop and a yellow legal pad and a pen that was almost out of ink. I told myself I was going to be systematic about this. I was a nurse. I understood the value of clear documentation, of looking at a situation without flinching, of naming things accurately, even when the truth was ugly. I opened my bank statements and started from the beginning. The $55,000 transfer 18 months ago, that was the foundation. The number I already knew by heart, because it represented nearly everything I had saved over 30 years of working double shifts and skipping vacations and telling myself that someday, when Nathan was settled and Gerald's memory had softened into something bearable, I would use that money to finally live a little. Then the monthly payments, $1,500 every first of the month for 18 months. I wrote each one down on the legal pad, neat rows of numbers adding up slowly and then all at once. $27,000. Gone. Then I kept going. The dining room table and 6 chairs, I had bought them as a housewarming gift because Brooke had mentioned offhandedly that the one they had was too small for dinner parties. $1,400. The new dishwasher when theirs stopped working 6 months after they moved in because Nathan called on a Tuesday evening sounding exhausted and I could hear the stress in his voice and I could not bear it. $850. The $400 car repair when Nathan's transmission started slipping and the insurance did not cover the full cost. The birthday gifts, the Christmas gifts, the groceries I had quietly left on their porch on 3 separate occasions when I knew from Nathan's voice that things were tight. I added it all up twice to make sure I had not made an error. $91,000. I set the pen down and looked at that number for a long time. $91,000 was 30 years of extra shifts. It was every vacation I had not taken, every new piece of furniture I had not bought for my own apartment, every small pleasure I had quietly set aside because Nathan's needs had always come first. It was Gerald's life insurance, the money he had left behind to take care of us, redirected into a house I was not welcome inside. A memory surfaced without warning, the way they sometimes do at 3 in the morning when your defenses are down. Nathan was 4 years old. We had been at the park all afternoon and he had fallen asleep in the car on the way home. I carried him inside, all 38 pounds of him, his head heavy on my shoulder, his small fist curled loosely against my collarbone. I remember the specific weight of him, the warmth, the way his breath came slow and even against my neck. I remember thinking that I would carry him forever, if that was what he needed, that there was nothing in the world I would not do for this child. I sat at my kitchen table at 3 in the morning in my Myers Park apartment, and I let myself cry for that memory, for that version of Nathan and that version of me, before everything had become so complicated and so painful. Then I wiped my face with the back of my hand, straightened my back, and looked at the number on the legal pad again. $91,000. And I was still on that mortgage. I pulled up the loan documents Nathan had asked me to sign 18 months ago, documents I had reviewed quickly because I trusted my son and had not imagined I would ever need to read the fine print carefully. My name was right there, listed as co-signer alongside Nathan and Brooke, equally liable. If they defaulted, my credit would be destroyed alongside theirs. Everything I had left, my good credit, my financial stability, my ability to retire someday with some measure of dignity, was tied to a house where I was no longer welcome. I closed the laptop. Outside, the first gray light of dawn was beginning to soften the darkness beyond the oak trees. I picked up my phone and sent James Whitmore a text message. I need our Monday meeting to be as early as possible. There is more at stake here than I initially realized. His response came 4 minutes later, which told me I was not the only one who sometimes could not sleep. 7 in the morning. My office. I'll have coffee ready. I set the phone down, pulled my robe tighter around my shoulders, and watched the sun come up over Charlotte for the first time in my life, feeling something I could not immediately name. It took me a few minutes to recognize it. It was clarity, cold and quiet and absolute. I called the bank at 8:30 that Monday morning, before my meeting with James. I had dressed carefully. Navy slacks, a white blouse, low heels. The same way I dressed for difficult conversations at the hospital, when I had to tell a family something they were not prepared to hear. Clothing as armor, composure as a shield. The mortgage officer who answered was professional and unhurried, a woman named Deborah who spoke in the measured cadence of someone accustomed to delivering complicated information to people in difficult situations. I explained that I was a co-signer on a mortgage and needed to understand my legal position and my options. She walked me through it carefully. As a co-signer, I was equally liable for the full loan amount. I had the right to receive account statements and payment notifications directly. If the primary borrowers failed to make payments and I did not cover them, the account would move toward default after 90 days. A default would appear on my credit report alongside theirs, regardless of who was responsible for the missed payments. And if I wanted to remove myself from the mortgage entirely, I asked. The only clean path, Deborah explained, was refinancing. The primary borrowers would need to qualify for the loan on their own without my income or credit supporting the application. I already knew what that meant. Nathan's salary as a junior civil engineer was decent but not sufficient. Brooke had been working part-time at a marketing agency for the past several months after her promotion fell through. Together, without my name on the loan, they would not qualify. The bank had told me as much when we first structured the arrangement 18 months ago. I thanked Deborah, wrote 3 pages of notes, and drove to James Whitmore's office in Uptown Charlotte. Nathan called 7 times that Monday while I was in James's office. I watched my phone light up on the corner of the conference table, his name appearing and disappearing, appearing and disappearing. I did not answer. James noticed, but said nothing. He was that kind of attorney, the kind who understood that some silences were deliberate and worth respecting. I got home to my apartment at just after 6 that evening. I had barely set my bag down when I heard the knock at the door. Rapid, urgent. The knock of someone who had been holding their anxiety in all day and had finally reached the end of their ability to contain it. I took my time hanging up my coat before I answered. Nathan looked terrible. His hair was uncombed, his shirt was untucked, and there were shadows under his eyes that told me he had not slept any better than I had. He was still in his work clothes, his tie loosened and pulled to one side, his jacket hanging off one shoulder like he had put it on in a hurry and forgotten about it. Mom. He exhaled when I opened the door, the sound of a man who had been bracing for something and was not sure whether my face meant relief or catastrophe. Thank God, I've been calling all day. I know, I said. Come in. He followed me into the living room and turned to face me, running one hand through his hair. The bank called this morning. There's a problem with the mortgage payment. They said it didn't go through. Is everything okay with your account? Did something happen? I sat down in my armchair and folded my hands in my lap. Nothing happened with my account, I said. I canceled the payment. The color left his face so completely and so quickly that for a moment he looked like the 17-year-old boy I had told about his father. That same stripped, uncomprehending look, the look of someone whose world has just shifted beneath their feet without warning. You what? I canceled the automatic transfer. Sunday night, after I left your house. Mom. His voice dropped. You were there? You heard. I heard everything, Nathan. He sat down heavily on the couch, elbows on his knees, head dropping forward. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The apartment was very quiet. Outside, a car moved slowly down the street, its headlights sweeping briefly across the ceiling. Mom, please. When he looked up, his eyes were red at the edges. We're counting on that payment. The mortgage is due at the end of the week. You can't just... I can, I said. And I have. This is about Sunday. About what Brooke said. It's about a great many things, Nathan. Sunday was simply the moment I stopped pretending those things didn't matter. I kept my voice level, the same voice I used in the emergency room when panic was not an option. I have paid $1,500 every month for 18 months. That is $27,000, not counting the $55,000 I gave you for the down payment, not counting the furniture, the appliances, the car repairs, the groceries. I paused. Your wife wants me out of your lives because I am interfering. I am choosing to respect that wish. Fully. Nathan stared at me. She doesn't know about the payments. She doesn't know about any of it. Then perhaps, I said quietly, It is time she did. They came together the next morning. I heard the knock at 7:15, sharp and impatient, the kind of knock that does not ask permission. I was still in my robe, standing at the kitchen counter with my first cup of coffee. I set the cup down carefully, straightened my spine, and went to the door. Brooke walked in without waiting to be invited. She was dressed for work, her hair pulled back, her makeup immaculate. But her eyes were hard, in a way that no amount of careful grooming could soften. Nathan followed behind her, his shoulders hunched, his gaze fixed somewhere on the floor between us. "We need to talk," Brooke said. "Not a request." "Good morning," I said. I left the door open and walked back to the kitchen to retrieve my coffee. A small act of deliberate calm. Brooke followed me. Nathan told me everything. About the payments, about the down payment, about all of it. She stopped in the middle of my kitchen, her arms crossed. "I want you to know that I think what you've been doing is manipulative and controlling. You've been paying our mortgage in secret so you'd have leverage over us, so we'd owe you. So you could keep your hooks in Nathan forever." That's not generosity, Eleanor. That's manipulation. I took a slow sip of my coffee. Nathan came to me asking for help. I gave it. You gave it with strings attached. You gave it in secret so Nathan would feel guilty, and so you could hold it over our heads whenever you felt like you weren't getting enough access to our lives. Brooke. Nathan's voice came from the doorway, cautious and tired. "That's not exactly—" "It is exactly," she said, not looking at him. Her eyes stayed fixed on me. "Your mother has been running this family like a bank that charges interest in the form of emotional debt. Every gift, every payment, every favor at all comes with an invisible price tag, and that price tag is control." I set my coffee cup down on the counter, slowly, deliberately. When Nathan came to me 18 months ago, I said he needed $55,000 or he was going to lose the house he wanted. When he asked me to co-sign the mortgage because the two of you did not earn enough to qualify on your own, I said yes. When he asked me to keep the arrangement private because he said you were too proud to accept help, I respected that. I did all of those things because he is my son and I love him. Not because I wanted leverage. Not because I wanted control. I paused. "But I understand now that you see it differently." "What I see," Brooke said, her voice rising, "is a woman who couldn't let go. Nathan's father died, and instead of building her own life, she buried herself in her son's. You've been using Nathan as a substitute for everything you lost. And now that he has a real life, a real marriage, a real future, you can't stand that you're not the center of it anymore." The room went very still. I watched Nathan's face. He was looking at the floor. "Is that what you think?" I asked him quietly. He did not answer. Brooke was not finished. She took one step closer, her voice dropping into something uglier and more deliberate. "You want to know the truth, Eleanor? You couldn't keep your husband. You worked yourself to the bone for 30 years, and you ended up alone in a small apartment with nothing to show for it except a son who felt too guilty to cut the cord. And now you're doing this, canceling payments, playing games, because it's the only power you have left." She held my gaze. "You're alone, because that's what you deserve." The words landed exactly where she intended them to. I stood very still for a moment, the way I had learned to stand still in emergency rooms when everything around me was falling apart. Then I set my coffee cup in the sink, turned around, and looked at both of them. "Get out of my home," I said. "Both of you, now." Brooke picked up her bag without another word and walked to the door. Nathan lingered, his face pale and stricken, his mouth opening and closing, around words that did not come. "Nathan," I said. He looked at me. "Go?" He went. I closed the door behind them. I stood in my hallway with my back against the door and my eyes closed, and I breathed. In through the nose, out through the mouth, the way I had taught 100 panicking patients to breathe in 31 years of emergency nursing. Then I walked to my bedroom, sat on the edge of my bed, and cried in a way I had not cried since the morning I found out Gerald was gone. Not neat, composed tears, the kind that hurt your chest and make it hard to catch your breath and leave you feeling scraped out and hollow afterward. When it passed, I sat quietly for a moment. Then I picked up my phone and called Kevin in Denver. He answered on the second ring. "Mom? What's wrong? A great deal, I said, but I think I'm going to be all right. My voice was steadier than I expected. Kevin, I need to ask you something. When Brooke and Nathan got married, you told me to be careful. That you had never fully trusted her. I remember. What did you mean? Specifically. A pause. Mom, what happened? I'll tell you everything. But first, I need you to tell me what you know about Brooke that you never told me. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Okay, Kevin said finally. I think it's time I did. I dressed carefully for my Monday morning meeting. Navy suit, pearl stud earrings that had belonged to Gerald's mother, low heels. The same outfit I wore when I testified in a malpractice hearing 8 years ago on behalf of a colleague who had been wrongly accused. Clothing that said I am composed, I am prepared, and I am not someone you should underestimate. James Whitmore's office occupied the top floor of a renovated brownstone on Tryon Street in uptown Charlotte. The building was old enough to have character, but well-maintained enough to signal success. A brass nameplate beside the door, dark wood paneling inside, the smell of good coffee and old books. James himself was 42, lean and sharp-eyed, with the unhurried manner of someone who had seen enough human chaos to stop being surprised by it. Carol Simmons had recommended him 3 years ago when I needed help updating Gerald's estate documents. He had been thorough and honest then. I trusted him to be the same now. His assistant showed me into the conference room. James was already there, a legal pad in front of him, 2 cups of coffee on the table. Eleanor. He stood and shook my hand. Sit down. Tell me everything. I had brought a folder, organized, tabbed, the way I organized patient charts, bank statements going back 20 months, the original co-signing agreement, a handwritten summary of every financial contribution I had made, with dates and amounts. The total at the bottom of the last page, $91,000. James read through everything without interrupting. I watched his jaw tighten slightly when he reached the page with the monthly payments. He made a small note in the margin when he saw that no formal repayment agreement had ever been drafted. When he finished, he set the folder down and looked at me. Eleanor, did Nathan and Brooke know you were making these payments? Nathan knew. Brooke did not. Or so Nathan told me. And there was never any written agreement? No promissory note, no loan documentation, nothing that formalized the arrangement? No. Nathan said it was temporary. He said they would take over the payments within 6 months. I paused. That was 18 months ago. James leaned back in his chair and was quiet for a moment, looking at the folder. You have several options, he said finally. None of them are painless. He laid them out methodically, the way I appreciated, without softening the edges. The first option was to continue paying and accept the contributions as gifts. Legally clean, financially ruinous, and emotionally untenable given the circumstances. The second option was to stop paying entirely, which I had already done, and let Nathan and Brooke manage the mortgage themselves. The risk was significant. As co-signer, any default on their part would damage my credit equally. 90 days of missed payments would trigger default proceedings. My financial stability, carefully rebuilt over 30 years, would be collateral damage in their crisis. The third option he described as the most aggressive. If Nathan and Brooke could not refinance the mortgage without me, which he strongly suspected they could not given their income, I could petition to force a sale of the property. Given the substantial financial contributions I had made that were never formalized as a loan, there was a reasonable argument that I held an equitable interest in the asset. Would that hold up? I asked. Possibly. It would be contested, it would be expensive, and Eleanor. He looked at me directly. It would very likely end your relationship with your son permanently. I thought of Nathan's voice on Sunday afternoon. You are right. I will handle it. I understand, I said. Here is what I recommend for now. James folded his hands on the table. You have stopped paying. Eventually, within days probably, they will realize the money is not coming. They will panic. When people panic, they make mistakes. And mistakes create leverage. Let them come to you. In the meantime, I will draft a formal demand letter outlining your contributions and requesting either a refinancing arrangement that removes you from the mortgage or a structured repayment plan for the funds already provided. And if they refuse, Then we discuss the third option. I signed his retainer agreement before I left. The number at the bottom of the page was substantial, but not shocking. 30 years of emergency nursing had taught me that some things were worth paying for without hesitation. Protection was one of them. I walked out of James Whitmore's office onto Tryon Street into the pale October morning, the Charlotte skyline rising gray and glittering around me, and I felt something I had not felt in a very long time. Not anger, not grief. Resolve. I called my supervisor at Carolinas Medical Center the morning after Brooke, and Nathan left my apartment and requested a week of personal leave. Dr. Sandra Mills covered my shifts without asking questions, which told me she had noticed something in my face over the past several days that I had not managed to hide as well as I thought. I booked a flight to Phoenix that same afternoon. Diane Kowalski had been my closest friend since we were 23 years old and sharing a 2-bedroom apartment in Chapel Hill while I was in nursing school, and she was finishing a degree in landscape architecture. We had lived parallel lives since then, moving in different directions geographically, but remaining close in the particular way that certain friendships manage across distance and decades. She had been through 2 marriages and 2 divorces, had raised a daughter, mostly alone, and had eventually settled on 4 acres of Red Rock Desert outside Scottsdale, Arizona, where she grew succulents and kept 2 dogs, and had cultivated the kind of hard-won peace that only comes from having survived a significant amount of difficulty. She had been asking me to visit for 3 years. I landed at Phoenix Sky Harbor on a Wednesday afternoon. Diane was waiting at the arrivals gate, which she absolutely did not need to do since I was 62 years old and perfectly capable of finding my own way to baggage claim, but that was exactly the kind of thing Diane did. She took one look at me as I came through the doors and pulled me into a hug without saying a word. We drove the 40 minutes to Scottsdale mostly in silence, the desert opening up around us in shades of amber and rust and pale gold, the saguaro cacti standing tall and still against the late afternoon sky. I had forgotten how different the air felt out here. Drier, cleaner, like breathing through a window that had just been opened for the first time in a long while. Diane's house sat at the end of a long gravel drive, low and adobe style, with a wide covered porch that looked out across the desert toward the McDowell Mountains. She had a garden of barrel cactus and desert sage along the front path, and 2 enormous dogs, Clyde and Rosie, who greeted me with the uncomplicated enthusiasm that only dogs are capable of. That first evening, she fed me green Chile enchiladas and poured generous glasses of a Sonoma Pinot Noir, and did not ask me a single question about why I had called her on 48 hours' notice needing to get out of Charlotte. We watched the sun go down over the mountains and then sat on the porch in the warm desert dark, listening to the coyotes in the distance. And for the first time in almost a week, I felt something loosen slightly in my chest. The next morning, I woke before dawn and found Diane already on the porch with 2 mugs of coffee, watching the sky lighten over the McDowell Range. I wrapped my hands around the mug and sat beside her and watched the colors shift from deep blue to violet to the particular burning pink and gold that desert sunrises do differently than anywhere else on Earth. After a while, Diane said quietly, "Whenever you're ready." So I told her. All of it. From the Sunday afternoon at the Ballantyne house to the legal pad at 3 a.m. to James Whitmore's conference room to Brooke's words in my kitchen. I told her about the $91,000 and the co-signed mortgage and the 18 months of payments Nathan had asked me to keep secret. I told her about Nathan's silence on that Sunday afternoon and the way he had looked at the floor when Brooke said the things she said about me in my own kitchen. Diane listened without interrupting. Her face grew tighter as the story progressed. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the desert. "That calculating little snake," she said finally, her voice flat and certain. Despite everything, I almost smiled. "Diane, I mean it. I've been around long enough to recognize someone who identifies a threat and moves to eliminate it." "That's what she did, Ellie. You weren't interfering. You were a reminder of everything she was benefiting from and couldn't control. People like Brooke can't stand what they can't control. You think it was that deliberate? I think it doesn't matter whether it was deliberate or instinctive. The result is the same." She refilled my coffee. "The question is what you do now. I have a lawyer. I've stopped the payments. James says to let them come to me." "Good. That's good." She looked at me steadily. "But Ellie, what do you actually want? Not what's legal, not what's strategic. What do you want? I looked out at the mountains for a long time before I answered. I want Nathan to choose me, I said. Not my money, me. I want him to look at what Brooke did and what he did and tell me that it was wrong. I want to matter to my son in a way that has nothing to do with what I can give him. Diane nodded slowly. Then you need to create the conditions where that choice is possible. And right now, the only way to do that is to stop making it easy for them to take you for granted. 3 days into my visit, Diane invited her neighbor Renee Caldwell over for dinner. Renee was 67, recently retired after 30 years as a family law attorney in Phoenix, with silver hair cut close and the kind of direct, unhurried manner that comes from decades of sitting across tables from people in the worst moments of their lives. She brought a bottle of good Bordeaux and a lemon tart from a bakery in Old Town Scottsdale and settled into Diane's porch chair like someone who had sat in it many times before. Over dinner, without quite intending to, I found myself explaining the situation to her. She listened the way attorneys listen, asking precise questions at careful intervals, her expression giving nothing away. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Your lawyer's advice is sound, she said. The leverage is real and the strategy is correct. She turned the wine glass slowly in her hand. But Ellie, I want to ask you something that has nothing to do with the law. Go ahead. I have handled family financial disputes for 30 years. I have seen mothers and sons, fathers and daughters, siblings, spouses go to war over money and property. And in almost every case, someone wins legally and loses something they can never get back. She looked at me directly. Can you live with the possibility of losing Nathan permanently? Not just temporarily. Not just until things cool down. Permanently. Because that is a real outcome here. And I want you to go into this with your eyes open. The question settled over the table like something heavy. I don't know, I said honestly. That's the right answer, Renee said. Anyone who tells you they know for certain hasn't thought about it carefully enough. She set down her wine glass. Here is what I will tell you. The best outcomes I have seen in cases like this are the ones where the person with the leverage uses it to establish a boundary, not to punish. You are not trying to destroy them. You are trying to make them understand that you will not be invisible and you will not be exploited. If you keep that as your North Star, you will make better decisions. That night, I lay in Diane's guest room, listening to the desert silence, and turned Renee's question over and over in my mind. Could I live with losing Nathan permanently? By morning, I had not found a clean answer, but I had found something else. The knowledge that whatever happened next, I would not be making decisions out of fear. I had spent enough of my life doing that. I turned my phone on Wednesday afternoon, sitting on Diane's porch with a glass of iced tea and the McDowell Mountains going amber in the late daylight. The notifications came in a wave. 41 missed calls, 28 text messages, 3 voicemails. I scrolled through the text first, the way you pull a bandage off slowly when you already know it is going to hurt. From Nathan, in chronological order, the messages traced an arc from confusion to desperation to something that sounded very close to genuine grief. Mom, please call me back. I don't understand what's happening. Mom, the bank sent a late notice. We need to talk about this. Mom, I'm sorry about what Brooke said. She was out of line. Please call me. Mom, I'm begging you. Please just talk to me. I love you. I read each one twice. Then I moved to Brooke's messages. The tone was entirely different. You are being incredibly selfish and childish right now. Do you have any idea what you're putting Nathan through? Fine. You want to play games? We'll figure it out ourselves. We don't need you. This is emotional manipulation, Eleanor. What you're doing is a form of elder abuse. I've looked it up. That last one made me set the phone down on the armrest and look out at the desert for a full minute before I trusted myself to keep reading. Diane appeared in the doorway with a fresh glass of iced tea, read my expression, and sat down in the chair beside me without saying anything. I handed her the phone and let her read Brooke's messages. She handed it back without comment. But the look on her face said everything. I scrolled to the voicemails, 2 from Nathan, 1 from a number I didn't recognize. Nathan's first message was from Sunday evening, his voice tight and controlled, asking me to call him back. His second was from Tuesday morning, and his voice had changed. It was quieter, more stripped down, the voice of someone who had stopped trying to sound composed. Mom, I don't know if you're listening to these. I don't know where you are or if you're okay. And that's been the hardest part of all of this, not knowing if you're all right. I just need to know you're safe. That's all. Please. I listened to it twice. Then I scrolled to the message from Kevin. Mom, when you get this, call me. It's about the house. There's something I should have told you a long time ago, and I think you need to know it now. I'm sorry I waited this long. I called him immediately. He answered before the second ring. Mom, thank God. Are you okay? I'm in Scottsdale with Diane, I said. I'm all right. Kevin, what is it? What do you know about the house? A long pause. The sound of him exhaling slowly. 4 months ago, Nathan called me. He'd had a few drinks, I could tell from his voice. He wasn't making complete sense at first, but eventually I pieced together what he was telling me. Another pause. Brooke had convinced him to take out a home equity line of credit against the Ballantyne house. $28,000. The desert went very quiet around me. When? I asked. My voice came out steadier than I felt. 4 months ago. Right around the time Brooke started pushing harder to limit your visits, from what Nathan described. Kevin's voice was careful, the way it gets when he is trying to deliver information, without inflicting more pain than necessary. Mom, the money was to pay off debt from their wedding. Apparently, they had financed most of it on credit cards and a private loan from Brooke's aunt, and the interest was killing them. Brooke told Nathan the equity line was the smart financial move. Clean up the high-interest debt, start fresh. I sat very still. Nathan asked you not to tell me, I said. It was not a question. He did. He said you'd worry and that they had it under control. I shouldn't have agreed to that. I felt guilty about it ever since. And I'm sorry, Mom. I should have told you. You're telling me now, I said. There's something else. His voice dropped slightly. The wedding, Mom. It was 3 years ago. They financed it from the beginning. The venue, the catering, the dress, the honeymoon in Tuscany, all of it went on credit. They've been carrying that debt this entire time, making minimum payments while you were paying their mortgage. I closed my eyes. While I had been sitting at my kitchen table eating plain toast and calculating whether I could afford to replace my worn-out running shoes, Nathan and Brooke had been carrying $30,000 in wedding debt and pulling equity from a house I had helped them buy, and not one word of it had reached me. Kevin, I said, thank you for telling me. What are you going to do? I'm going to call my lawyer, I said, and then I'm going to finish my visit with Diane and come home and deal with this clearly. Mom, his voice was soft. I love you. And for what it's worth, I think you're handling this with more grace than most people would. I don't feel very graceful, I said. You never do, he said. That's what makes it real. I called James Whitmore the moment I hung up with Kevin. He listened without interrupting as I relayed everything Kevin had told me. When I finished, there was a brief silence on his end, the kind that meant he was thinking carefully rather than simply pausing. A home equity line of credit, he said, $28,000 4 months ago. Yes. Eleanor, do you understand what this means practically? They use the equity that accumulated in the property, equity that exists in large part because of your $55,000 down payment, to borrow additional money against the house. Money that went to pay personal debt that had nothing to do with the property. I understand. This changes your legal position considerably. His voice was measured, but I could hear the shift in it. They have been leveraging an asset you helped create while simultaneously pushing you out of their lives and concealing a second lien on the property from you. As co-signer on the original mortgage, you had a right to know about any additional encumbrances on that property. This information was withheld from you. Can we use that? We can certainly present it as part of the broader picture. A pause. Eleanor, I want to ask you directly. Are you prepared to pursue the forced sale option if it comes to that? Because with a second lien and 60 days of missed payments approaching, the situation is moving toward a point where that may become the most realistic path to protecting yourself. I looked out across Diane's desert. The sun was low now, the mountains going deep purple and rust at the edges, the sky above them a color I had no name for. Yes, I said, if it comes to that, yes. Then here is what I recommend. Enjoy the rest of your visit, come home, let them continue to stew. The longer they go without the payment and without a response from you, the more clearly they will understand that the situation has genuinely changed. Then we will meet. review the full picture, including the equity line, and determine our next move. I thanked him and ended the call. Diane appeared in the doorway. She had heard enough from my side of the conversations to understand the shape of what had happened. She sat down beside me and handed me a small glass of bourbon without saying anything. I took a sip and looked at the mountains. They barred against the house, I said, to pay for the wedding 3 years ago while I was paying their mortgage. Diane was quiet for a moment. Ellie, she said finally, you have been the foundation of a house built on sand, and they have been decorating the walls while the ground shifts underneath. I turned that sentence over in my mind for a long time. It was the most accurate description of the last 18 months I had heard. I flew home to Charlotte on a Sunday. Nathan and Brooke were parked outside my building in Myers Park when my cab pulled up. Nathan's truck sat beneath the oak trees, the engine off, both of them visible through the windshield. Brooke in the passenger seat, Nathan behind the wheel, neither of them speaking. I paid the driver, collected my bag, and walked toward my building without acknowledging them. I heard the car doors open behind me. Eleanor. Brooke's voice was different from the last time I had heard it. Softer, carefully arranged into something that resembled contrition. Please, just give us a few minutes. I stopped at the building door, keys in hand. Nathan stepped forward. He looked like he had not slept properly in days. Mom, please just hear us out. I looked at them both for a moment. Then I opened the door. 5 minutes. Upstairs, they sat together on my couch. Brooke perched at the edge, hands clasped in her lap, her posture, the careful posture of someone who had rehearsed this. Nathan sat beside her, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, his eyes on the floor. I owe you an apology, Brooke began. Her voice was measured, sincere sounding. What I said to you in your kitchen was cruel and wrong. You have been nothing but generous to us, and I repaid that generosity with disrespect. I was stressed and overwhelmed, and I took it out on you, and that was not fair. It was a good apology. Nearly perfect, in fact. The right words in the right order, delivered with the right amount of remorse. But something about it sat wrong. Too smooth, too prepared. I looked at Nathan. And you? He lifted his eyes to mine. I should have defended you. On that Sunday. And in the kitchen. And every time before that when I let things go further than they should have. I was a coward, Mom. I kept choosing the easier thing instead of the right thing. I'm sorry. I sat with that for a moment. It was closer to what I had needed to hear. But I noticed, again, what was missing. Not an acknowledgement that things would change. Just that he was sorry for what had already happened. Then Brooke said, we have something to tell you. We weren't planning to share this yet, but we think you should know. She and Nathan exchanged a glance. I'm pregnant, Brooke said. 9 weeks. Everything looks healthy. The room tilted slightly. A grandchild. My first grandchild. Brooke's hand moved to her stomach, a gesture both protective and deliberate. We want our child to know their grandmother. We want you involved, Eleanor. Doctor's appointments, the birth, all of it. We were wrong to push you away, and we don't want that for our family. I kept my face composed. Congratulations. That's wonderful news. There's something else we need to discuss, Nathan said carefully. The mortgage. We're in a difficult position right now. My performance review is coming up, and there's a real possibility of a raise. Brooke is planning to pick up additional freelance work after the first trimester. We just need a little more time. How much time? I asked. A few more months, Brooke said. Just until after the baby comes and we find our footing. We were hoping you could continue helping temporarily. There it was. Not repayment, not change. More time, more money, wrapped in the promise of a grandchild I could hold. And if I don't? I asked quietly. Something shifted behind Brooke's eyes. The careful arrangement slipped, just slightly. Then we might lose the house, she said. Is that what you want? Your pregnant daughter-in-law and your son losing their home? Your grandchild born into that kind of instability? Brooke. Nathan's voice was a warning. She stood up, the composure cracking now. No. She needs to understand the reality here. Eleanor, you can help us, or you can watch us lose everything. Those are the choices in front of you. And if you choose to let that happen, what does that say about the kind of person you are? I stood up. It says, I will not be blackmailed with my own grandchild, I said. My voice was very calm. It says, I understand exactly what just happened in this room. You came here with an apology designed to soften me, and the moment it didn't work, you reached for the one thing you thought I couldn't say no to. I looked at Nathan, and I need you to say something right now. Not to fix this, not to make peace. I just need to know whether you see what she just did. Nathan looked between Brooke and me. The silence stretched. Mom, he said finally, she's carrying my child. I have to think about my family. His family, not our family. I walked to the door and opened it. Good night. They left without another word. I stood alone in my apartment, the door closed behind them, and felt something settle into place inside my chest. Not peace exactly, but something like it. The particular steadiness that comes from having held a line you were not sure you could hold. I had not caved. Even for a grandchild, I had not caved. James Whitmore called me on a Friday morning, 3 days after Nathan and Brooke had left my apartment. I was at Summit Coffee on East Boulevard, sitting at my usual corner table with a cappuccino and a medical journal I had not managed to read a single page of, when my phone lit up with his name. Eleanor, I have something significant to share with you, he said. I had my paralegal run a full title search on the Ballantyne property this morning. The home equity line of credit Kevin told you about is confirmed. $28,000, recorded 4 months ago. It is a second lien on the property, junior to the original mortgage. I suspected as much, I said. There is something else. A brief pause. The account on the original mortgage is now 62 days past due. I received notification this morning as part of the cosigner alert we set up. The bank has been attempting to reach Nathan and Brooke directly. Based on the contact log, they have not been responding. I set my cappuccino down. They are hiding from it, I said. It appears so. Eleanor, 60 days means we are 30 days from default proceedings. At that point, your credit is formally at risk alongside theirs. His voice was measured but direct. I think it is time to file. I looked out the window of Summit Coffee at the street outside, the Charlotte morning moving past in its ordinary way, people walking dogs and pushing strollers and carrying coffee cups, the city entirely indifferent to the fact that my world was quietly restructuring itself around me. File the papers, James, I said. All of them. The petition to establish equitable interest and compel sale of the property at Ballantyne was filed the following Monday morning. By Tuesday evening, Nathan was at my door. He did not knock so much as pound. I heard it from my bedroom where I was reading. 3 rapid bursts that rattled the door in its frame. I set my book down, took a breath, and went to answer it. Nathan looked wrecked, unshaven, red-eyed, his jacket on inside out in a way that suggested he had put it on in the dark or in a panic or both. He pushed past me into the apartment without waiting to be invited, which he had never done before in his life. A petition to compel sale? His voice was ragged. Mom, what is this? You're trying to take our house? Brooke is pregnant and you're filing legal papers to take our house? Come inside properly, I said. Sit down. I don't want to sit down. I want to know what you're doing. I am protecting myself, I said. The same thing I should have done 18 months ago. By taking our home. By refusing to remain financially liable for a property I am no longer welcome to visit. I sat down in my armchair and kept my voice even. Nathan, the mortgage is 62 days past due. The bank has been calling you. You haven't been answering. If it reaches 90 days, my credit goes into default alongside yours. I will not allow that to happen. He ran both hands through his hair. We were going to handle it. We just needed more time. You have had 18 months of more time. I looked at him steadily. And there is something else we need to discuss. The home equity line of credit. $28,000, taken out 4 months ago against a house I helped purchase and have been paying for. The color drained from his face. How did you... He stopped. Kevin told me. He is known for 4 months. Nathan, what was the money for? I want to hear it from you. The silence that followed was long and painful. Nathan sank onto the couch, his elbows on his knees, his head dropping forward. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. The wedding, he said. We financed most of it, the venue, the catering, Brooke's dress. We put it on credit cards and a loan from Brooke's aunt. And we kept telling ourselves we would pay it off when her promotion came through. When it didn't, we kept paying the minimums and the interest just kept building, and Brooke said the equity line was the smart move, that it would consolidate everything at a lower rate and we could manage it better. Well, I was paying your mortgage, I said. He did not answer. He did not need to. Nathan. My voice cracked slightly, the first time it had all week. I skipped meals so you could have a winter coat when you were 16 years old. I worked double shifts on Christmas Eve so you could go on your senior class trip. I liquidated my entire retirement to give you that down payment. And for 18 months, I paid $1,500 a month toward a home I was being slowly pushed out of, while you and Brooke were carrying secret debt from a wedding you could not afford and borrowing against the only asset I helped you build. I stopped. And you never told me. I know, his voice broke. Mom, I know, I am so sorry I messed up. I let Brooke convince me that we could manage it, that telling you would only make things worse, that you would worry and interfere, and he stopped himself. Interfere, I repeated quietly. He flinched. The next morning, Brooke came alone. She arrived at 7 a.m, which told me she had been awake all night. Her hair was loose, her makeup absent for the first time I could ever remember, her eyes swollen. She knocked twice, and when I opened the door, she came in without the careful composure of her previous visits. Whatever script she had prepared, if she had prepared one, was gone. You cannot do this, she said. Her voice was raw. Eleanor, I am 9 weeks pregnant. We will lose everything. Nathan is barely holding it together. You are going to destroy your own son over money. I am protecting myself over money, I said. There is a difference. There is no difference. She sat down uninvited on my couch, which surprised me. She looked genuinely undone in a way I had not seen before. You want to know the truth? I have been terrified of you since the day Nathan and I got engaged. Not because you're cruel, because you're necessary. Because Nathan needed you in a way he has never needed me, and I didn't know how to compete with that, so I tried to eliminate it instead. Her voice dropped. I know that was wrong. I know what I did was wrong. I am telling you because I think you deserve the truth, even if it's ugly. It was the most honest thing she had ever said to me. I sat down across from her and looked at her carefully. Brooke, I said, I believe you mean that. Right now, in this moment, I think you mean it. I paused. But meaning something in a moment of crisis is not the same as changing. And I have run out of runway for hoping that things will change without consequences. Her face crumpled. So that's it? You're really going to do this? I am going to protect myself, I said. I am going to remove myself from a financial situation that puts everything I have left at risk. What happens after that depends on choices that are not mine to make. She left without another word. I stood at my window and watched her cross the parking lot below, her shoulders hunched against the October wind, and felt the particular grief of a relationship that might have been different under different circumstances, with different choices, with more honesty from the beginning. Then I turned away from the window and called James Whitmore to confirm that we were proceeding. The negotiation took 3 weeks. James handled most of it through Nathan and Brooke's legal aid attorney, a young woman named Stephanie Crawford, who was competent and overworked and clearly uncomfortable with the position her clients had put her in. The conversations were professional and largely without drama, which surprised me. I had expected more fighting. What I got instead was the quiet, exhausted capitulation of 2 people who had finally run out of options and knew it. The numbers were stark. The original mortgage balance stood at $171,000. The home equity line added another $27,000. Late fees and penalties brought the total debt load to just over $203,000. The property had been appraised at $245,000, a modest increase from the purchase price 18 months earlier, driven largely by the improvements Nathan had made to the backyard deck and the kitchen fixtures. After closing costs, realtor commission, and full repayment of both liens, there would be approximately $38,000 remaining. James negotiated firmly and without sentiment. Given my $55,000 down payment and 18 months of mortgage contributions, he argued that I held a clear, equitable interest in the property that superseded any claim Nathan and Brooke might make on the remaining equity. Stephanie Crawford pushed back moderately, but without real conviction. The math was not on her client's side, and she knew it. The final agreement was this. I would receive $42,000 from the sale proceeds. Nathan and Brooke would receive nothing. The second lien would be paid in full from the sale. My name would be removed from all associated debt. I would walk away financially whole, or as close to whole as the situation allowed, and free. It was not justice. $91,000 in and $42,000 out was not a calculation that balanced. But James had been honest with me from the beginning. A protracted legal battle would cost more than the difference and damage far more than finances. This was the best available outcome, and I accepted it. The closing was scheduled for a Thursday morning in November at James's office in Uptown Charlotte. I arrived early. The conference room was the same one where I had sat 6 weeks earlier with my organized folder and my $91,000 total, and my carefully maintained composure. The room looked exactly the same. I felt entirely different. Nathan arrived alone. Brooke had not come, which Nathan explained in a single quiet sentence before sitting down. She could not face it. I nodded and said nothing. He looked better than he had in weeks. Shaved, properly dressed, his eyes clearer, though still carrying something heavy behind them that I suspected would not lift quickly. We sat across the table from each other, while James and Stephanie Crawford walked through the documentation. Page by page, everything explained and initialed and signed in the careful procedural language of legal finality. Nathan signed each page without hesitation. I watched his hands move across the documents, the same hands I had held crossing streets when he was 4 years old, the same hands that had gripped mine in the bleachers at his Little League games, and I felt the grief of it move through me cleanly and completely, like weather passing. When the last page was signed, James collected the documents and excused himself briefly, leaving Nathan and me alone in the conference room for the first time. The silence between us was not hostile. It was simply immense. Nathan looked at the table for a long moment. Then he looked at me. "I hope you're happy, Mom," he said. His voice was not cruel. It was just tired and sad and very young sounding in a way that reminded me painfully of the boy he had been. "I'm not happy, Nathan," I said. "I want you to know that. There is nothing about any of this that makes me happy." I held his gaze. "But I am safe, and after everything that has happened, being safe matters more to me right now than being happy." He nodded slowly. His jaw worked for a moment. "I know I failed you," he said quietly. "I know I let things go further than they ever should have. I keep trying to figure out when I stopped being someone who would have stood up for you, and I can't find the exact moment. It just happened gradually and then all at once, and by the time I understood what was happening, I didn't know how to stop it." I looked at my son for a long time. "I know," I said, and I meant it. Not as absolution, but as truth. I did know. I had watched it happen and not known how to stop it either. James returned with the final executed copies. Nathan stood, shook James's hand, and picked up his jacket from the back of the chair. At the door, he stopped and turned back. "Mom," his voice was very quiet, "I do love you. I need you to know that. Whatever else is true, that part is true." "I know that too," I said. He walked out. I sat alone in the conference room for a few minutes after he left, the executed documents in a neat stack in front of me, the Charlotte skyline visible through the tall windows, gray and glittering in the November light. James came back in and set the check on the table in front of me without comment. $42,000. I looked at it for a long moment. Then I folded it carefully, put it in my coat pocket, and stood up. "Thank you, James," I said, "for everything." "Take care of yourself, Eleanor," he said. I walked out of his office onto Tryon Street and stood on the sidewalk in the cold November air, the city moving around me in its ordinary way, and breathed. It was over. 6 months passed. The seasons turned from the gray quiet of November through the cold clarity of a Charlotte winter and into the tentative warmth of early spring, and with them, slowly and then all at once, so did I. The first thing I did after the closing was deposit the $42,000 check into my retirement account. It was not enough to replace what I had lost. The math was simple and unforgiving. $91,000 out, $42,000 back. Nearly $50,000 gone, along with the years of compounding interest that money would have generated had I left it untouched. I would need to work longer than I had planned. 3 more years at minimum, possibly 4. I had made peace with that. The second thing I did was call Dr. Sandra Mills at Carolinas Medical Center and tell her I was ready to come back. She told me there was something we needed to discuss in person. 2 days later, I sat across from her in her office and she slid a job description across the desk. Senior Charge Nurse, Carolinas Medical Center Emergency Department. Increased salary, improved scheduling, a supervisory role I had been quietly considered for twice before but had declined both times because Nathan had needed something and I had redirected my energy toward him instead. "I've been holding this for you," Sandra said simply. "I hoped you'd be ready eventually." I accepted the position before I left her office. The work steadied me in the way that meaningful work always has. The emergency department was the same organized chaos it had always been, demanding and relentless and occasionally heartbreaking, but it was mine in a way that felt clean and uncomplicated. I was good at it. I had always been good at it, and for the first time in years, I was doing it entirely for myself, without the background hum of guilt, about hours I was not spending somewhere else, or money I was not sending to someone else. I joined a yoga class on Tuesday evenings at a studio on South Boulevard, mostly because Carol Simmons had been asking me to try it for 2 years, and I had always found a reason not to. The instructor was a woman named Beth, patient and warm and funny in the dry, understated way of someone who has seen too many people take themselves too seriously. I was not naturally flexible, and the first 3 classes were humbling in ways I had not anticipated. By the 6th class, I noticed that I was sleeping better than I had in years. Carol and I started meeting for coffee on Saturday mornings at Summit Coffee, a ritual that had begun as a practical arrangement and had deepened, the way the best friendships do, into something I looked forward to more than almost anything else in my week. We talked about books and hospital politics and the particular challenges of being women in our 60s, navigating a world that had not entirely decided what to do with us. We did not talk about Nathan unless I brought him up first, which Carol somehow understood, without being told. My apartment in Myers Park, which had sometimes felt small and quiet in a way that shaded into lonely, began to feel like something different. A sanctuary. I bought a secondhand armchair for the corner by the bookshelf, deep and comfortable with good reading light beside it. I filled the kitchen windowsill with herbs I actually used, rosemary and thyme and a small pot of basil that required more attention than I expected and thrived anyway. I hung 3 photographs on the wall above my desk: the Charlotte skyline at dusk, a trail in the Blue Ridge Mountains Gerald and I had hiked the summer before he died, and a photograph Diane had taken on her porch in Scottsdale the morning after I arrived. The 2 of us sitting with our coffee cups watching the sunrise paint the McDowell Mountains gold. Through the quiet network of mutual acquaintances that small cities sustain, I heard occasional fragments about Nathan and Brooke. They had moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood called Steel Creek, modest but decent. Nathan had taken on additional project work through his engineering firm. Brooke's pregnancy was progressing without complications. They were managing, which was all I had asked of them, really. Not to thrive immediately, just to manage. To discover that they could stand on their own. In February, Diane flew in from Scottsdale for a long weekend. We had dinner at a restaurant in Noda, a neighborhood I had barely visited before and found I loved, with exposed brick walls and good wine and a noise level that required leaning slightly forward to hear each other properly, which had the pleasant effect of making every conversation feel intimate. "You look different," Diane said over the second glass of wine. She tilted her head, studying me, lighter, like something you were carrying got put down. I thought about that for a moment. "I put a lot of things down," I said. "I'm still learning which ones I actually needed." She smiled. "That's the work," she said. "That's the whole work right there." I raised my glass and she raised hers, and we sat in the comfortable noise of the restaurant, and I felt, fully and without qualification, that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The message arrived on a Tuesday morning in April. I was between patients at the hospital, standing at the nurse's station with a cup of coffee going cold beside me and a chart open on the computer screen, when my phone buzzed in my coat pocket. Unknown number? I read it standing at the counter. "This is Brooke. I wanted you to know that the baby came yesterday. A girl. 6 pounds, 5 ounces. She is healthy and beautiful, and we are both doing well. We named her Eleanor Diane Hartwell. I thought you should know. I set the phone face down on the counter and stood very still for a moment. Eleanor Diane, my name, and Diane's. Carol appeared at my elbow with a fresh cup of coffee, looked at my face, and set it down beside me without saying anything. I picked up the phone and read the message again. Then I kept reading. There was more below the name. I owe you an apology that is long overdue. Not the kind I gave you in your apartment, which I know was rehearsed and transactional and not what you deserved. A real one. What I did to you over those 18 months was wrong. I was frightened and territorial, and instead of being honest with you or with Nathan, I chose to push you out. You were never the problem. I made you the problem because it was easier than looking at the real ones. I am sorry, Eleanor. Genuinely and without conditions. If you ever want to meet her, the door is open. We are in Charlotte now. Nathan got a position with a firm here. We would both like to hear from you when and if you are ready. There is no pressure and no expectation. Just an open door. I read it twice more. Then I forwarded it to Diane with no message attached. Her response came 4 minutes later. A single line. She named that baby after you, Ellie. That means something real. I called Kevin that evening from my armchair by the window. He had heard from Nathan already, which did not surprise me. She's beautiful, Mom, he said. Nathan sent me a photo. She has your eyes, I think, or maybe I just want her to. I smiled at that. He's different, Kevin said carefully. Nathan. Since the closing, since everything fell apart and they had to rebuild, I think he finally grew up. I think losing the house was the thing that made him actually grow up. Maybe, I said. You going to reach out? I don't know yet, I said. I want to, but I want to be sure I'm doing it because it's right and not because I'm afraid of missing something. That's a good reason to wait, Kevin said. But Mom, for what it's worth, I think she meant it. The apology. I think Brooke finally told the truth. I sat with that after we hung up. The apartment quiet around me. The oak trees outside the window just beginning to show the pale green of new leaves in the April light. I typed and deleted 3 different responses to Brooke's message before I finally settled on one. Thank you for telling me. I am glad she is healthy. Eleanor Diane is a beautiful name. I will be in touch when I am ready. I sent it before I could reconsider. Then I put the phone in my pocket, pulled on my jacket, and walked down to Freedom Park. The cherry trees along the main path were in full bloom, their petals drifting in the warm April wind. The park filled with the particular unhurried joy of a city discovering spring again after a long winter. I walked for an hour without destination, through the rose garden and along the pond path and back out through the main gate. And by the time I returned to my apartment, the tight feeling I sometimes still carried in my chest had loosened into something bearable. On the kitchen table was a card I had received that morning from Carol. Inside, she had written simply, in her small, neat handwriting, Napa Valley in June, my nephew's wedding. Say yes. I sat down at the table and found a pen. Yes, I wrote beneath her note. Then I made dinner, poured a small glass of wine, and sat at my kitchen table in the quiet of my Myers Park apartment. The herb pots on the windowsill, the photographs on the wall, the comfortable armchair in the corner, and I thought about open doors. Some doors you walk back through because you have healed enough to do it safely. Some doors you leave closed because walking through them would undo the healing. The wisdom is in knowing which is which, and the wisdom takes time, and that is all right. I was not ready yet, but for the first time, I believed that someday I might be. Looking back now, from the quiet of a life that finally feels like my own, I understand something I could not have articulated 18 months ago when I was sitting at my kitchen table at 3 a.m, counting the cost of loving someone too much and protecting myself too little. Generosity is not the same as self-erasure. For 30 years, I confused the two. I told myself that giving everything I had, every dollar, every hour, every quiet sacrifice made in the dark when nobody was watching, was what love looked like. And perhaps it was, for a time. Perhaps there are seasons of life when that kind of total giving is exactly what is called for, when a child is small and the world is large, and someone has to stand between the two without flinching. But seasons change. And the love that sustains a child does not always look the same as the love that honors an adult. At some point, giving everything stops being an act of love and becomes an act of fear. Fear of not being needed. Fear of not being enough. Fear of the silence that settles in when you finally stop running towards someone else's life and turn to face your own. I had been afraid of that silence for a long time. What I found when I finally stopped running was that the silence was not empty. It was full of the person I had set aside for 30 years, the woman who loved hiking and quiet Saturday mornings and good wine, and the particular satisfaction of a job done with skill and care. The woman who had more to give the world than a checkbook and an open door and a willingness to absorb whatever was asked of her without complaint. That woman had been waiting patiently for me to come back to her. Here is what I know now, and what I wish someone had told me before. It cost me nearly everything to learn it. Helping someone should never require you to disappear. Love is not measured in dollars or sacrifices or the number of times you said yes when everything in you wanted to say no. Real love, the kind that lasts and sustains and actually means something to both people, requires honesty. It requires boundaries. It requires the willingness to say this is not working and mean it, even when the person you are saying it to is someone you have loved since before they could walk. And if someone treats your generosity as entitlement, if they accept your sacrifice without gratitude and your presence without respect, you are allowed to stop. You are allowed to step back. You are allowed to protect yourself, even from the people you love most, especially from the people you love most, because the alternative is to keep giving until there is nothing left of you to give. Being a good mother does not mean being invisible. It does not mean absorbing every cost and swallowing every hurt and shrinking yourself smaller and smaller until you fit comfortably into whatever space the people around you have decided to allow you. It means showing your children, by the way you live your own life, what it looks like to stand up for yourself with dignity, what it looks like to know your own worth, what it looks like to love generously without losing yourself in the process. I am still learning that. I suspect I will be learning it for the rest of my life, but I am learning it in a life that is mine, in a quiet apartment with herbs on the windowsill and good books on the shelf and friends who know my whole story and love me anyway, in a job that challenges me and rewards me and reminds me every single day that I am capable and skilled and needed in ways that have nothing to do with my bank account. And somewhere across this city, in a small apartment in Steel Creek, there is a little girl named Eleanor Diane who has her whole life ahead of her. And when the time is right, when I am ready and the foundation is solid and the door opens from a place of genuine healing rather than desperate need, I intend to walk through it. Not because I owe anyone anything, but because I choose to. And that is the difference. That is everything. Thank you for sitting with me through this story. I know it was a long one, and I know it was not easy in places, and I am grateful, truly grateful, that you stayed until the end. If any part of what I shared today reflected something you have lived or are living, I would love to hear from you in the comments below. Tell me what you would have done. Tell me where you are in your own story. And if this reached you somewhere that mattered, please share it with someone who might need to hear it too. Take care of yourselves. You deserve that. I will see you in the next one.
Thank you for staying with me until this point. Please comment number 1 so I know you're still here with me. And a quick notice before we continue. The next story contains some fictional elements and is created for entertainment and reference purposes only. Thank you for your support and for being here.
My son said, "I decided to sell your house to buy a new car for my wife. She's more important than you. You have 24 hours to pack your things." I just smiled. He didn't know that the house was actually already sold. I'm glad you're here with me. Please like this video and listen to my story till the end and let me know which city you're listening from. That way I can see how far my story has traveled. I smiled when my son said those words. He had no idea what was coming. Let me take you back 6 months earlier when life seemed normal. I was Martha Henderson, 68 years old, living in the modest 2-story house my late husband Robert and I had bought 43 years ago in suburban Connecticut. Robert passed away 3 years ago from cancer, leaving me the house, a small pension, and memories that filled every corner of those walls. I spent my days gardening, volunteering at the local library, and waiting for my son Derek's weekly phone calls that came every Sunday at 6 p.m. sharp, or at least they used to. The first troubling sign came last April. Derek called on a Wednesday, not Sunday. "Mom, Jessica and I were thinking, your house is pretty big for just one person, isn't it?" His voice had that tone, the one he used when he wanted something but pretended he was doing me a favor. "Maybe you should consider downsizing. Think about it." I brushed it off. He was probably concerned about me managing the property alone, but the calls became more frequent, more insistent. "Mom, have you thought about what we discussed?" "Mom, Jessica found this great assisted living facility." "Mom, you're not getting any younger." Each conversation chipped away at the warmth between us. My daughter-in-law, Jessica, who used to call me weekly to chat about recipes and her garden, suddenly stopped calling altogether. When I did see her at Sunday dinners, she'd stare at her phone, offering nothing but cold smiles and monosyllabic responses. By June, the pretense had dropped completely. They came to my house one Saturday afternoon without calling first. Jessica walked through my living room like a real estate agent, commenting on outdated fixtures and wasted space. Derek followed behind her, nodding along like a puppet. "This place could sell for at least $600,000, Mom," he said, avoiding my eyes. "You could get a nice apartment and still have money left over." "Left over for what?" I asked, my stomach tightening. "Well, for your care, and maybe to help family." He glanced at Jessica, who was examining my mother's china cabinet with calculating eyes. That's when I understood. This wasn't about my well-being. This was about their wants. Over the next month, I watched my son transform into someone I barely recognized. He'd grown entitled, influenced entirely by Jessica's expensive tastes. I'd see her Instagram posts, designer handbags, luxury vacations, complaints about their old BMW that was only 3 years old. Meanwhile, Derek worked long hours at his accounting firm, his face growing more haggard with each visit, while Jessica didn't work at all, spending her days at yoga studios and wine bars with friends who seemed just as materialistic. The situation escalated in July when they brought a real estate agent to my house. Without asking permission, I came home from the library to find a strange woman measuring my living room while Jessica pointed out selling features. I asked them to leave. Derek barely apologized. Jessica didn't even look at me. But nothing prepared me for what happened 2 weeks ago, on that Tuesday afternoon that changed everything. Derek barged through my front door without knocking. His face was red, his jaw set. Jessica stood behind him in the doorway, arms crossed, wearing a smug expression that made my blood run cold. "Mom, we need to talk. Now." He didn't wait for me to respond, just planted himself on my couch like he owned it. "I've made a decision. I'm selling this house." I stared at him. "You're selling my house?" "Jessica deserves a new car. The BMW is embarrassing. She's important to me. More important than you keeping this old house when you don't even need it." His words came out in a rush, like he'd rehearsed them. "I'm giving you 24 hours to pack your essentials. We've already talked to a lawyer. Since Dad left the house to you without a trust, and you're getting older, we can make a case for conservatorship if we need to." Jessica stepped forward then, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "It's for your own good, Martha. You'll thank us later." My son, my only child, whom I'd raised alone after his father worked himself to death to give him a good life, stood there threatening to declare me incompetent so he could steal my home and buy his spoiled wife a luxury vehicle. I smiled. I couldn't help it. The irony was too perfect. Because what Derek didn't know, what neither of them knew, was that I'd sold the house 3 weeks ago. Derek's face twisted with confusion when he saw me smile. "What's so funny?" he demanded, standing up from my couch. Jessica's eyes narrowed suspiciously. Nothing, dear, I said quietly, keeping my expression neutral despite my racing heart. I understand. 24 hours. I'll start packing. They exchanged glances. Derek looked slightly guilty, Jessica triumphant. They left without another word, Jessica's designer heels clicking against my hardwood floors like a countdown timer. The moment the door closed, my legs gave out. I sank into Robert's old armchair, the one I'd kept because it still smelled faintly of his cologne, and let the reality wash over me. My son had just threatened me. My own child had stood in the house his father and I had built our life in and threatened to have me declared incompetent, to strip away my autonomy, my dignity, everything, just so his wife could have a newer car. How had I raised someone capable of this? I sat there for an hour, maybe two, staring at the family photos on the mantel. Derek as a baby. Derek's first day of school. Derek's college graduation, where he'd thanked me tearfully for all the sacrifices I'd made. Where had that boy gone? When had Jessica's influence poisoned him so thoroughly? But beneath the hurt, something else was growing. A cold, clear anger that sharpened my mind instead of clouding it. They'd made a crucial mistake. They'd assumed I was helpless, that I'd simply roll over and let them take everything. They'd underestimated me completely. I walked to my bedroom and pulled out the file folder I'd hidden in the back of my closet 3 weeks ago. Inside were all the documents, the sale contract for the house, the closing papers, the bank statements showing the $615,000 deposit from the sale. I'd sold it to a lovely young couple, the Reyes family, who had a baby on the way and had fallen in love with the house the moment they saw it. The closing had happened quickly. They'd paid cash from an inheritance. They'd even agreed to let me rent the house back from them for 6 months while I figured out my next steps, which had seemed like a blessing at the time. Now I realized it was even better than that. It was leverage. My hands trembled as I looked through the papers, but not from fear anymore, from something else entirely. A plan was forming in my mind, one that would teach Derek and Jessica a lesson they'd never forget. First, I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. I opened my laptop. Yes, this 68-year-old woman knew how to use technology, thank you very much, and started researching Connecticut conservatorship laws. What I found made my blood boil, but also gave me hope. Derek would need to prove I was actually incompetent, unable to manage my own affairs. He'd need medical evidence, psychiatric evaluations, a court hearing. It wasn't something he could just do overnight, despite his threats. But the fact that he'd even mentioned it told me how far he was willing to go. I spent that entire evening making lists, thinking through every angle. What did Derek and Jessica actually know about my finances? Nothing, I realized. I'd always been private about money, a habit from growing up poor during harder times. They assumed I was living off Robert's small pension and Social Security. They had no idea I'd been carefully investing for years, that I had nearly $200,000 in various accounts beyond the house sale money. They thought I was a helpless old woman. That was their first mistake. By midnight, I had the skeleton of a plan. I wouldn't tell them about the sale immediately. No, that would be too easy, too quick. They wanted to play games with my life. I'd let them play. I'd let them show their true colors completely, dig themselves in deeper, reveal to everyone, to themselves, exactly who they'd become. And then, when the time was right, I'd pull the rug out from under them. I picked up my phone and called my friend Margaret, who I'd known since Derek was in diapers. She answered groggily, "Martha, it's midnight. What's wrong?" "Margaret," I said, my voice steady now, "I need your help, and I need you to trust me when I say you can't tell anyone, not even your daughter, what I'm about to ask you." There was a pause. Then, I'm listening. I need a place to stay for a few days, maybe a week. And I need you to help me move some things out of my house tomorrow while Derek is at work. Can you do that? What's going on? I'll explain everything, but right now I need to know, are you with me? Margaret didn't hesitate. Always have been, honey. Always will be. I smiled again, but this time it wasn't from irony. It was from determination. The game had begun. The next morning, I woke up at 6 a.m. and got to work. Margaret arrived at 8 with her son's pickup truck, just as I'd asked. We had exactly 7 hours before Derek typically came home from work. "You're sure about this?" Margaret asked as we stood in my living room. "Completely." I handed her a list. "These are the items that matter. Family photos, Robert's military medals, my mother's jewelry, important documents. Everything else can stay." We worked systematically, room by room. I wasn't running away, not yet. I was securing what mattered, preparing for what came next. Every photo album, every irreplaceable memory went into boxes that we loaded into Margaret's son's truck. By 2 p.m., the most precious parts of my life were safely stored in Margaret's basement. The house looked the same, but it was hollowed out, just like Derek had tried to hollow me out. At 3 o'clock, I drove to my lawyer's office. Gerald Morrison had handled Robert's will and had known our family for 20 years. When I called that morning asking for an emergency appointment, he'd cleared his schedule. "Martha," he said, studying me over his reading glasses, "tell me what's happening." I told him everything. Derek's threats, Jessica's manipulation, the conservatorship mention. His face grew grimmer with each detail. "Do you have any proof of these threats?" he asked. "Not recorded, if that's what you mean. But there's something else." I pulled out my phone and showed him text messages I'd found last night while I couldn't sleep. Derek had sent them to his cousin Linda 2 weeks ago. Linda had forwarded them to me this morning after I'd called her, explaining the situation. The texts made everything clear. Mom's being stubborn about the house. Jessica's threatening to leave me if I don't get her the Mercedes she wants. I might have to play hardball, get her declared incompetent or something. She's old enough that people would believe it. I know it sounds harsh, but Mom will be fine in assisted living. She doesn't need a whole house. Jessica needs this car. Our marriage depends on it. Gerald's jaw tightened as he read. "This is, Martha, this is evidence of elder financial abuse, attempted exploitation. With the conservatorship threat, this could be grounds for a restraining order if you wanted one." "I don't want a restraining order," I said calmly. "Not yet. But I need you to do something for me." I outlined my plan. Gerald's eyebrows climbed higher with each point, but when I finished, he was nodding slowly. "It's unorthodox," he admitted, "but completely legal. And given what they're trying to do to you," he pulled out a legal pad. "Let's make this ironclad." We spent 2 hours going over every detail. By the time I left his office at 5 p.m., I had everything I needed: documentation, legal protection, and a strategy that would force Derek and Jessica to face exactly what they'd become. I drove home carefully, my mind clear and focused. When I pulled into my driveway, my heart lurched. Derek's car was already there. He'd come home early. And Jessica's Mercedes SUV, apparently the BMW had been traded in already, on credit, I suspected, was parked behind it. They were inside my house, waiting. I took a deep breath, grabbed my purse with Gerald's documents safely inside, and walked to my front door. It was unlocked. They'd used Derek's old key. I found them in the living room, Jessica sitting on my couch like she owned it, Derek pacing nervously. "Mom, where have you been?" Derek demanded. "We've been calling you for hours." "I was out," I said simply, setting down my purse. Jessica stood up, her arms crossed. Have you started packing? The realtor is coming tomorrow morning to take photos and list the property. Something inside me went very still. Is that so? Yes, Derek said, trying to sound firm, but mostly sounding defensive. We've decided to move forward quickly. The sooner we sell, the sooner we can all move on with our lives. And you've already contacted a realtor. My voice was flat. Of course, we can't waste time. Jessica smiled that poisonous smile. You understand, don't you, Martha? This is business. Nothing personal. Nothing personal. They were stealing my home, and it was nothing personal. I see. I walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water with hands that didn't shake at all. When I turned back, they were both watching me with expressions I'd never seen before, something calculating and cold. Derek cleared his throat. So, Mom, about your bank accounts. We're going to need you to add me as a co-signer, just in case something happens to you, you know. We need to make sure everything's in order. There it was, the final proof. They weren't just after my house. They wanted access to everything. I took a slow sip of water and smiled at my son. Of course, Derek. Whatever you think is best. His relief was visible. Jessica actually laughed, a short, triumphant sound. They had no idea what was coming. As they left, Jessica whispered something to Derek in the doorway. I heard it clearly. I told you she'd cave. Old people always do. I closed the door behind them and locked it. Then I pulled out my phone and called Gerald. It's time, I said. They just took the bait. Let's move to phase 2. The next morning at 9 a.m. sharp, the realtor arrived. Her name was Sandra Chen, a sharply dressed woman in her 40s who looked confused when I answered the door. Mrs. Henderson? I'm here to photograph the house for the listing. Your son Derek arranged. I know why you're here, I said pleasantly. But there seems to be a misunderstanding. This house is not for sale. Sandra's brow furrowed. I'm sorry, but Derek Henderson contacted my office yesterday. He said, Derek doesn't own this house. I do, and I haven't authorized any sale. I handed her a copy of the title deed that Gerald had prepared for me, along with a letter on his law firm's letterhead. If you have questions, you can contact my attorney. Sandra scanned the documents, her face going pale. I'll need to call Derek. Please do. And if he tells you anything different, tell him I said to check the property records. They're public. She left quickly, already dialing her phone. I watched from my window as she sat in her car, making calls. First Derek, then someone else. Her broker, probably. My phone rang 10 minutes later. Derek. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again. And again. 7 times in 20 minutes. Then the text started. Mom, what did you do? Call me right now. This isn't funny. You're making a huge mistake. I silenced my phone and continued with my morning tea. They arrived at noon, both of them. Derek's face red with anger, Jessica's twisted in fury. They pounded on the door so hard I thought they might break it. I opened it calmly. Hello, Derek. Jessica, what the hell did you tell that realtor? Derek pushed past me into the house. She's threatening to report me for fraud. Do you have any idea what you've done? I told her the truth. I closed the door carefully, blocking their path deeper into my home. This is my house. You have no right to sell it. We're trying to help you, Jessica shrieked, her composure completely gone. You're too old to manage this place. We're your family. If you're my family, then act like it. My voice was quiet, but it cut through her hysteria. Family doesn't threaten. Family doesn't manipulate. Family doesn't try to steal. Derek's face changed. Calculation replacing rage. Mom, I think you're confused. Maybe we should schedule that doctor's appointment we discussed. Get you checked out. Memory issues can be... I'm not confused, Derek. I pulled out my phone and played the voice memo I'd recorded yesterday when they'd demanded access to my bank accounts. Their own words filled the living room, crystal clear. The color drained from his face. That's taken out of context, he stammered. Is it? I played the text messages from Linda next, his own words about getting me declared incompetent. Is this out of context too? Jessica grabbed Derek's arm. She's recording us. She's trying to trap us. Derek, we need to... You need to leave my house, I said firmly. Both of you. Now. You're making a terrible mistake, Jessica hissed, her mask completely slipped now. You think you're so smart, so independent? You're a lonely old woman with no one who cares about you except us. You'll die alone in this house and no one will find you for weeks. Is that what you want? The cruelty in her voice took my breath away, but I stood firm. Get out, now, or I'm calling the police, Derek tried one more time. Mom, please, we can work this out. Jessica's upset. She didn't mean... Yes, she did. And you let her. You became her. Now leave. For a moment, I thought Derek might actually become violent. His fists clenched, his jaw worked. But then Jessica pulled him toward the door. Fine, she spat. Keep your precious house, but don't come crying to us when you need help. We're done. You hear me? Done! They slammed the door so hard a picture frame fell off the wall. I stood there, shaking now that they were gone, and sank into the nearest chair. My heart was hammering, adrenaline flooding my system. I'd stood up to them. I'd actually done it. But Jessica's words echoed, "You'll die alone in this house." Was I being foolish? Stubborn? Would I regret this? No. No, I wouldn't. Because what they wanted wasn't love or care. It was control and money. I called Margaret. Can I come stay with you for a few days? I need some space to breathe. Pack a bag. I'll make up the guest room. For the next 3 days, I stayed at Margaret's house, away from my phone, away from the constant barrage of texts and calls from Derek and Jessica. Margaret's husband, John, made his famous pot roast. We watched old movies. I slept for 12 hours the first night, exhausted from the emotional toll. Margaret sat with me on her porch on the third evening. You did the right thing, you know. Did I? I stared at the sunset. He's my son, and you're his mother, but that doesn't give him the right to abuse you. She squeezed my hand. Whatever you're planning next, I'm here. I nodded slowly. The rest had helped. My mind was clear again, my determination restored. It was time for the next phase. When I returned home on Thursday morning, I found a letter tucked under my door. Expensive cream-colored stationery. Derek's handwriting. Dear Mom, I'm sorry. We both are. Jessica and I talked and we realized we pushed too hard. We were wrong to pressure you about the house. You have every right to live there as long as you want. Can we start over? Please come to dinner this Sunday. Jessica wants to apologize in person. We're family, and family should work through their problems together. Love, Derek. I read it twice, looking for the trap. It was there, in the phrases. As long as you want, not it's your house. Work through their problems, as if I was the problem. My phone buzzed. A text from Jessica, the first direct message she'd ever sent me. Martha, I'm sorry for what I said. I was stressed about money and took it out on you. Can we please talk? Mother to mother? I need your guidance. Mother to mother. She'd never called me that before. I set the phone down and made myself coffee, thinking. This was the next tactic, manipulation through guilt and false reconciliation. They'd figured out aggression didn't work, so now came sweetness and repentance. But I'd been a mother for 42 years. I knew the difference between genuine remorse and strategic apology. I didn't respond to either message. On Friday, flowers arrived. 24 red roses with a card. "We love you, Mom. Please forgive us." They must have cost $200. Money they supposedly didn't have for anything except Jessica's car. I gave them to my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, who was recovering from hip surgery. Saturday brought a gift basket from an expensive specialty store. Cheeses, crackers, imported chocolates. Another card. "You deserve the best. Let's talk. Derek and Jessica." I donated it to the library's fundraiser raffle. Sunday morning, Derek showed up alone. I watched him from my window, sitting in his car for 10 minutes before finally approaching my door. He knocked softly, not pounding this time. I opened it, but didn't invite him in. "Mom?" He looked tired, older than his 42 years. "Did you get my letter?" "I did." "Will you come to dinner, please? Jessica made your favorite. Pot roast with those little potatoes you like." I studied my son's face, looking for the boy I'd raised. Was he still in there somewhere? Or had that person been completely consumed by whatever he'd become? "Derek, answer me honestly. If I come to dinner, what happens?" He blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what's the real agenda? Are you actually sorry, or are you just trying a different strategy?" His face flushed. "That's not fair. I'm trying to apologize and you're—" "I'm being cautious. Because 2 weeks ago, you threatened to have me declared incompetent so you could steal my house. Because your wife told me I'd die alone. Those aren't things you come back from with a few flowers and a letter. People say things they don't mean when they're upset." "Do they?" I kept my voice level. "Because those texts to Linda, the ones about playing hardball with your mother, you sent those before we argued. You were planning this." The guilt that flashed across his face told me everything. "I thought so," I said quietly. "Derek, I love you. You're my son, and I always will love you. But I don't trust you anymore. And until you can show me, really show me, not just tell me, that you've changed, we don't have anything to discuss." "So that's it? You're just cutting me off?" His voice rose. "Mom, I'm your only child. And that's supposed to give you the right to abuse me?" Something sharp entered my tone. "You want back in my life? Fine. Get counseling. Both of you. Work on your marriage without using me as a piggy bank. Show me you can be the man your father and I raised you to be. Then we'll talk." "You're being unreasonable." But there was desperation in his voice now, not anger. "I'm being appropriate. Now please leave." He stood there for a long moment, mouth opening and closing, like he wanted to say something, but couldn't find the words. Finally, he turned and walked back to his car. I watched him drive away and felt nothing. No guilt. No doubt. Just a cold, clear certainty that I was doing the right thing. That afternoon, I went to the library where I volunteered. My friend Patricia, the head librarian, pulled me aside. "Martha, I heard something happened with Derek. Are you okay?" Word traveled fast in small communities. I hadn't told anyone except Margaret the full story, but apparently enough had leaked, probably through Linda, that people were aware of the conflict. "I'm fine," I said. "Better than fine, actually." Patricia studied me carefully. "You know, if you need anything, and I mean anything, you just have to ask. You've been here for this library, for this community, for years. We take care of our own." Her words brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "Thank you." Over the next few hours, 3 more people, volunteers and regular patrons, pulled me aside with similar offers. Apparently, Derek had made some calls around town, trying to find allies, telling people I was having memory issues and becoming difficult. It had backfired spectacularly. People who'd known me for decades weren't buying it. "That boy of yours always was entitled," Mrs. Patterson told me bluntly when I visited to check on her hip. "We all saw it. You were too close to notice, but the rest of us, we knew. And that wife of his is a piece of work." I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in weeks. I wasn't alone. Derek and Jessica thought they could isolate me, make me dependent and desperate. But I had something they'd never understood the value of: genuine community, real friends, people who knew my character. That evening, my phone stayed silent. No texts, no calls, no more attempts at reconciliation. They were regrouping, watching, waiting for their next opening. But I was ready. 10 days passed in relative peace. I began to wonder if Derek and Jessica had actually given up, accepted that I wouldn't be manipulated or threatened into submission. I should have known better. They arrived on Wednesday evening, just as the sun was setting. I heard the car doors close, heard their footsteps on my porch, 2 sets, walking in tandem. When I opened the door, they were both wearing what I can only describe as masks of concern. "Mom," Derek said softly, "can we please come in, just to talk? No agenda, I promise." Against my better judgment, or perhaps because I wanted to see how far they'd go, I stepped aside and let them in. Jessica sat on my couch, hands folded demurely in her lap, a far cry from the woman who'd screamed at me 2 weeks ago. "Martha, I owe you a real apology, not just flowers or gifts, a genuine, from-the-heart apology." I remained standing, arms crossed, waiting. "I've been selfish," she continued, her voice trembling slightly. "I got caught up in wanting things, material things, and I forgot what really matters: family, love, connection." She looked at Derek, who nodded encouragingly. "Derek and I have been going to counseling, like you suggested, and it's helped me realize how much I've hurt you." "Counseling?" I repeated. "Since when?" "We've had 2 sessions already," Derek said quickly. "With Dr. Morrison at the Family Wellness Center. We can give you his number if you want to verify." That was oddly specific. Maybe they were serious? "I'm glad you're getting help," I said carefully. "It's made us realize something," Jessica continued, her eyes meeting mine with what looked like sincerity. "We need you, Martha. Not your house, not your money. You. Derek needs his mother, and I—" She paused, her voice catching. "I never had a good relationship with my own mother. She was cold, distant. When I married Derek, I thought maybe I could have that with you. But I let my insecurities and materialism poison everything." I felt something shift in my chest. Could people really change this quickly? Was I being too harsh? Derek leaned forward. "Mom, we want to start over. Really start over. We're not asking you to trust us immediately. We know we have to earn that back. But can we at least try?" I studied them both. Jessica's perfect makeup, Derek's earnest expression. Something felt off, but I couldn't quite pinpoint what. "What does starting over look like to you?" I asked. "Weekly dinners," Derek said. "No talk about houses or money or any of that. Just family time, getting to know each other again." "And," Jessica added, pulling a folder from her purse, "we brought something to show our good faith." She handed it to me. "We traded in the Mercedes I bought. Used the money to pay off our credit cards instead. See? We're making better choices." I opened the folder. Inside were credit card statements marked "paid in full" and a receipt from a car dealership showing a trade-in credit for $47,000. It looked legitimate. "This is good," I said slowly. "This is a good step." Jessica smiled, and for a moment it seemed genuine. Then she said, "So, about the house." There it was. "What about the house?" My voice cooled instantly. Nothing, Derek said quickly. Nothing bad. We were thinking, since we're working on ourselves, maybe you could consider adding one of us to the title, just for emergency purposes. So if something happened to you, God forbid, the property wouldn't get tied up in probate. It would make everything so much simpler, Jessica added, her voice honey sweet. And it would show us that you're willing to trust us again, that you believe we've changed. And there it was. The trap, baited with fake counseling and manufactured reconciliation. Get out, I said quietly. Derek's face fell. Mom, we're just trying to get out. My voice was harder now. You came here with your act, your props, your lies. Did you really think I wouldn't see through this? Jessica's mask cracked. We're trying to help you. When you die, do you want the state to take everything? Do you want lawyers fighting over this house for years? When I die, I said, my voice like ice, this house will go exactly where I want it to go, and neither of you will get a penny. Derek stood up, his face reddening. You're being paranoid. We showed you proof we're changing. You showed me papers that could be faked in an hour. You told me about a counselor I'm supposed to just believe exists. You came here with a script you rehearsed together. I walked to the door and opened it. I'm not stupid, Derek. I'm not senile. I see exactly what you're doing. Jessica stood as well, her composure completely shattered now. You ungrateful bitch, she hissed. We wasted 2 weeks trying to be nice to you, and this is how you repay us? Jess, don't. Derek tried to grab her arm. She shook him off. No, I'm done playing games with her. She turned to me, her face twisted with rage. You think you're so smart, sitting here in your perfect little house with your perfect little life? You're pathetic, a lonely old woman clinging to the past. Derek's father is dead. Your friends will die soon, too. And then it'll just be you, alone, exactly like I said before. Jessica! Derek looked horrified. But she wasn't finished. You want to cut us off? Fine. But don't come crawling back when you fall and break a hip and there's no one to take you to the hospital. Don't call when you're sick and scared and need someone to care. We're done with you. She stormed out. Derek lingered for a moment, his face torn between shame and anger. Mom, Go, I said firmly. Go with your wife. You made your choice. After they left, I locked the door with shaking hands. My heart was racing, my breath coming fast. Jessica's words had hit their mark. The fear of dying alone, of being helpless, of needing help that wouldn't come. Was I making a mistake? Was pride worth isolation? No. No, what they wanted wasn't help or love. It was control. It was ownership. I walked to my bedroom and pulled out the folder Gerald had prepared. Inside was everything I needed for the final phase. The culmination of weeks of planning. My hands were still shaking, but not from fear anymore. From anticipation. They wanted to play dirty. They hadn't seen anything yet. I scheduled the meeting for Friday afternoon at Gerald's law office. The location was deliberate. Neutral ground, professional setting, witnesses. The letter I sent Derek was simple. We need to discuss the house situation. Come to Gerald Morrison's office at 2 p.m. Friday. Bring Jessica. This is not optional. They arrived 15 minutes late, probably trying to make an entrance. Jessica wore a designer suit that had definitely been purchased after she supposedly traded in the Mercedes. Derek looked nervous, shifting his weight from foot to foot. Gerald's secretary showed them into the conference room, where I was waiting with Gerald and 2 other people they didn't recognize. Linda, Derek's cousin who'd sent me the damning text messages, and Robert Chen, a representative from the Reyes family, the people who'd actually bought my house. Derek froze when he saw them. What is this? Sit down, I said calmly. This won't take long. They remained standing. Jessica's eyes darted between the strangers, calculating. Derek, Jessica, Gerald began formally. We're here today to clarify several legal matters regarding Martha Henderson's property and finances. We don't have to listen to this, Jessica said, grabbing Derek's arm. Come on, we're leaving. If you leave, I said quietly, Gerald will file a police report for attempted elder financial abuse and fraud. So I suggest you sit down. The color drained from Derek's face. They sat. I opened the folder in front of me, my hands completely steady now. Derek, do you remember 3 weeks ago when you barged into my house and demanded I pack my things because you were selling it? I was upset. I didn't mean... Do you remember telling the realtor Sandra Chen that you owned this house? Signing preliminary paperwork as the owner? Accepting her services under false pretenses? His mouth opened and closed. That's fraud, Gerald said matter-of-factly. Misrepresentation with intent to gain financial benefit. Jessica leaned forward. You can't prove. I have Sandra's testimony, I interrupted, signed and notarized. She's prepared to testify that Derek explicitly claimed ownership of the property. Linda spoke up then, her voice cool. And I have the text messages where Derek outlined his plan to manipulate his mother into giving up her house, where he discussed having her declared incompetent despite knowing she's perfectly capable. Derek's head snapped toward her. You betrayed me. Your own cousin. You betrayed your mother, Linda shot back. Someone in this family had to have a conscience. I continued, pulling out more documents. Derek, do you know what this is? I slid a paper across the table. This is the deed to my house. Notice the date. It was transferred to the Reyes family 3 weeks ago, 2 days before you threatened me. The silence was deafening. That's impossible, Jessica whispered. Robert Chen spoke for the first time, his voice calm and professional. It's quite real. My clients purchased the property for $615,000 cash. Mrs. Henderson sold it willingly, in full possession of her faculties, with proper legal representation. She's currently renting it back from us on a 6-month lease. Derek stared at the document like it was written in a foreign language. You sold it. I sold it, I confirmed. Because 6 months ago, when you first started pressuring me, I realized where this was heading. So I took steps to protect myself. You tricked us, Jessica shrieked. You let us think. I let you reveal exactly who you are, I said, my voice cutting through her hysteria like a blade. I gave you every opportunity to stop, to be a family, to show basic human decency. Instead, you threatened me, tried to have me declared incompetent, attempted fraud with the realtor, and just last week came to my house with fake counseling papers and forged credit card statements. They weren't fake, Derek protested weakly. Gerald slid another paper across the table. I called the Family Wellness Center. No Dr. Morrison works there. No counseling appointments were ever scheduled under your names. And the credit card statements? I added. I had an accountant friend examine them, photoshopped. The fonts don't even match real Capital One statements. Jessica's face had gone from red to white to gray. She looked like she might be sick. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice completely calm now. You're going to leave me alone, permanently. No calls, no visits, no attempts at reconciliation. You're going to accept that you have no claim to my property, my finances, or my life. And if we don't? Derek's voice was barely a whisper. Then Gerald files all of this with the police and the state attorney general's office. Elder abuse, fraud, forgery, attempted financial exploitation. I counted them off on my fingers. Connecticut takes these crimes very seriously. You're looking at felony charges, Derek. Years in prison, potentially. Your accounting license revoked. Criminal record. Everything you've built, gone. You wouldn't do that to your own son, Jessica said, but there was no conviction in her voice. I met Derek's eyes. Try me. The man sitting across from me wasn't the boy I'd raised. That boy had died somewhere along the way, replaced by this stranger who saw his mother as an obstacle, a resource to be exploited. "I loved you," I said quietly. "I gave you everything I had. Your father worked himself into an early grave so you could have a good life. And you repaid us by trying to steal the one thing we built together." My voice didn't break. I wouldn't give them that. "You're my son, Derek. You always will be. But right now, I don't like you very much." Derek's face crumbled. For a moment, genuine remorse flickered across his features. "Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened to me. Jessica, Don't you dare blame this on me," Jessica exploded. "You wanted that house as much as I did. You're the one who said—" "Shut up!" Derek shouted at her, then turned back to me. "Mom, please. Give me a chance to make this right. I'll go to real counseling. I'll fix this. Just don't cut me out of your life." I stood up, gathering my papers. "That's not my decision anymore, Derek. You cut yourself out when you chose money over family." I looked at Gerald. "File the restraining order. If either of them comes within 100 feet of me or attempts to contact me in any way, you have permission to proceed with criminal charges." "No!" Derek lunged from his chair, but Linda and Robert both stood, blocking his path. "Derek, don't make this worse," Linda said firmly. I walked to the door, then paused and looked back at my son one final time. "I hope someday you remember who you used to be. But until then, you're not welcome in my life." Jessica's voice followed me out. "You'll regret this. You'll die alone and miserable." I didn't look back. In the hallway, Gerald caught up with me. "Martha, are you all right?" My hands were shaking now, adrenaline flooding my system. But I nodded. "I'm fine. Better than fine. That was the hardest thing I've ever watched someone do." "It was the hardest thing I've ever done," I admitted. "But it was necessary." As I drove home, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt empty, drained, sad, but also free. The chains of obligation and guilt had finally broken. The restraining order was filed that evening. By Monday morning, Derek and Jessica had both been served with the papers, along with a formal notice from Gerald's office outlining the evidence of attempted fraud and elder abuse, and warning that any further contact would result in immediate criminal prosecution. I didn't hear from them again. Not a single call, text, or letter. The silence was profound. 3 weeks later, Linda called me. "Martha, I thought you should know. Derek and Jessica are getting divorced." I sat down slowly. "What happened?" Apparently, the stress of the legal situation made everything explode. Jessica blamed Derek for not handling you properly. Derek blamed Jessica for pushing him to extremes. It got ugly fast. Linda paused. "Derek moved into a studio apartment. Jessica's living with her mother now, ironically, the same mother she always claimed to hate." "How is Derek?" "Honestly, a mess. He got put on administrative leave at work pending an ethics investigation. Apparently, someone sent them information about his attempt to commit fraud. He's not handling it well." I felt a pang of something. Not quite sympathy, but not satisfaction either. He was still my son. Somewhere under all that damage. "Linda, thank you for keeping me informed. But I meant what I said. I can't have contact with him right now." "I understand. But Martha? For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. Derek needed to hit bottom. Maybe this is his chance to find his way back." Maybe. But that was his journey now, not mine. 2 months after the confrontation in Gerald's office, I received a letter from an unexpected source. Jessica's divorce attorney. Inside was a subpoena. Jessica was attempting to sue me for alienation of affection and intentional infliction of emotional distress. I showed it to Gerald, who actually laughed. "She's desperate. This lawsuit has no merit whatsoever. You didn't break up their marriage. They did that themselves. And everything you did was legal and justified. So what do? We file a countersuit for harassment and malicious prosecution, and we win." He was right. The judge dismissed Jessica's lawsuit within 20 minutes of the hearing, calling it frivolous and vindictive. Then he listened to Gerald present our counter evidence, all the threats, the attempted fraud, the forged documents, the pattern of abuse. Jessica's attorney advised her to settle rather than face criminal charges. The settlement was simple. Jessica would pay $15,000 in legal fees and agree to have no contact with me for the rest of her life. Any violation would result in immediate criminal prosecution with no further warnings. She signed without even reading it, her hands shaking with rage. As we left the courthouse, she tried one last time. "You destroyed my marriage!" she shouted across the parking lot. "You destroyed my life!" I turned to face her. This woman who'd tried so hard to destroy mine. No, Jessica, you did that yourself. When you decided money was more important than people. When you turned my son against his mother. When you forgot that cruelty always comes back around. I hope you rot in that house. Her voice broke. I hope. Goodbye, Jessica. I got into my car and drove away, leaving her screaming in the parking lot. I never saw her again. Derek's situation continued to deteriorate. The ethics investigation at his accounting firm concluded with his termination, not for the attempted fraud against me. They couldn't prove that affected his work, but for falsifying expense reports to maintain Jessica's expensive lifestyle. Apparently, the scrutiny I'd brought down on him led them to dig deeper into his finances. He lost his CPA license, his reputation in the community, most of his friends who didn't want to be associated with someone known for elder abuse. I heard through Linda that he'd moved 2 states away, was working as a bookkeeper for a small business, living in a tiny apartment, rebuilding his life from scratch. Part of me felt sorry for him, but a larger part knew that this was the consequence of his choices. Not my actions, but his. As for me, the 6-month rental period with the Reyes family ended, and I made a decision. I bought a beautiful 2-bedroom condo in a senior living community, not assisted living, but an active community for people over 55. It had a pool, a garden, social activities, and most importantly, a strong sense of community. The Reyes family kept my old house, turned it into a loving home for their growing family. Sometimes I drive by and see children's toys in the yard, hear laughter through the windows. It makes me smile, knowing that house is filled with love again instead of being torn apart by greed. I took the money from selling the house, the $615,000 plus my other savings, and set up a trust. Not for Derek, but for a scholarship fund at the local community college, helping students from low-income families afford education. It was named after Robert, my late husband, who'd always believed in education and opportunity. Every semester, 5 students receive $10,000 each. Some of them send me thank you letters telling me how the scholarship changed their lives. That's legacy. Not a house, not money in a bank account. The lives you touch, the difference you make. Gerald helped me draft a new will. Everything I own will go to various charities when I die. The library, the community college, local organizations that help seniors. Derek is mentioned in the will explicitly. To my son, Derek Henderson, I leave nothing, as he already took everything he wanted from me in life. It sounds harsh, maybe it is, but it's honest. And sometimes, honesty is the greatest kindness. 6 months into my new life at Riverside Senior Community, I woke up each morning actually excited about the day ahead. My condo was cozy, manageable, filled with light. I'd kept only the items that brought me joy: Robert's photos, my mother's china that I actually used now, books that I loved. I'd made friends quickly. Dorothy, a retired school principal. Frank and Susan, married 49 years. Maria, whose husband had passed 2 years ago, who understood grief without trying to fix it. We had weekly dinners, played bridge, took day trips. I'd joined the community theater and was volunteering at the local elementary school. My life was full, rich, purposeful. One Tuesday morning, Margaret called. Jessica was arrested for credit card fraud. She'd been opening credit cards in other people's names, including her own mother's. She was facing up to 10 years in prison. I felt mostly sad. Sad that greed could destroy someone so completely. Through Linda, I heard Derek had hit rock bottom but started real therapy. He was working at a nonprofit now, volunteering at a food bank. He asks about you, Linda said. He just wants to know you're okay. Don't tell him where I live, not yet, maybe not ever. Did I miss Derek? Sometimes I'd think about the little boy who brought me dandelions. But that boy was gone. At the community center, a woman asked me, "Do you ever regret cutting off your son?" I thought carefully. Family is supposed to love you, support you, respect you. When they become toxic, you have to ask yourself, is this relationship adding to my life or taking from it? But the guilt is real, I acknowledged. But so is peace. Those things are worth something too. Later, I received a letter from Derek. Mom, I was wrong about everything. I'm in therapy now. I heard you're happy. That makes me happy too. You deserve peace. I love you. I'm sorry. Derek, I read it 3 times, then folded it and put it in a drawer. Maybe someday we could have coffee, but not today. Possibly not ever. And that was okay. I had book club in an hour, then dinner with friends. Tomorrow, volunteering, then lunch with Dorothy and Maria. My calendar was full. My heart was healing. My life was mine. And that was enough. Claude is AI and can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. Sonnet 4.5 Claude is AI and can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. So here's what I learned. You can love someone and still set boundaries. You can be someone's mother and still say no. Family doesn't give anyone the right to abuse you, manipulate you, or steal from you. I spent 68 years being a good wife, a good mother, a good person. I'm spending the rest of my life being good to myself. What would you do if your own child tried to take everything from you? Would you stand firm or would you give in? Think about it. Share your thoughts. And remember, you teach people how to treat you. Thank you for listening to my story. Take care of yourselves. You deserve it.
Thank you for staying with us until the end. This story is a work of fiction, created solely for entertainment purposes. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. See you in the next video.